What's going on, FPL managers? Welcome to another video and podcast from Fantasy Football Scout. We're game week 17 time and it's only one day away, Pras. What are we doing? It's nice to have you here, by the way, mate. How are you?
Thank you very much, Ted. Lovely to be here. Yes, very exciting time for us, right? Game week after just a day's break, so love it.
Goodness me, game week's coming thick and fast this time of year. And that doesn't bode well for our squads in terms of the rotation possibilities and the likes of Cancelo being suspended this week. What on earth are we going to do with him? Plenty to discuss this week. We're going to look at plenty of comparisons in terms of the Chelsea defence. If you doubled up, do you have to get rid of one? We've got what to do with Cancelo. Do you hold? Do you sell? Which Man City players to buy? It's still a poignant question. I still don't have any Man City players. We'll have a look at those in general. We'll look at defensive prowess, see who the whipping boys. There's a couple of teams in there that might surprise you. So lots to get on with today, but we'll start off with looking at Pras's team from game week 16 and how you got on. So 57, which was a 65 with a -8. A -8, Pras. Talk us through it, buddy.
Yeah, well, one of these things, I've only started being on video this season, and it's one of these things when you go on it and you describe your -8 and you're just, it's double the panic as the game week is going on. Have you done the right thing? But look, I think overall, the idea was I was trying to, Sonaldo and I did this video on what the template looks like, right? And we thought what I have now come to is pretty much where most wildcarders are heading to, which is 3 at the back. So I have Ramsdale in goal, who's, I guess, between him and De Gea, the template keepers. Then I have Cancelo, James, and Trent, which, are the 3 standout defenders in the game. Got Dalot in for the new manager bounce, and I already had Davis. So Dalot played. He was one of my transfers in, got 5 points, which was okay, given that Alonso, despite his assist, got 4. In midfield, obviously had Salah. Foden is my guy, my City guy, and we'll come to it when we talk about the City players. But I'm glad, my ideal scenario was that he comes on, plays a little bit, and they were down to 10 men, Wolves. So I think I was happy that he got a good 35 minutes, 1 pointer, but that's fine. I'm optimistic on what goes on from here. Bowen was my other transfer in, and he looked okay. I think he's obviously somebody, given the fixtures, I wanted in. So 3-pointer from him. Up front, my man Ronaldo, obviously coming through. I didn't captain him, but I'm still happy that I have him for the run-in. And the 4th guy I got in was King. We'll, of course, talk about King versus Dennis. No video stream is complete without that comparison. And then Antonio. So I think overall 65 points this week, minus the 8, which is 57. I had a little bit of a rank drop, which was expected, of course, given the hit, but at around 35K with a decent team looking to save this week. So, all good.
Absolutely. Yeah, 2 red arrows for us this week, but I think we're both fairly well shaped up for the future. I think the transfers that you made were really good, even though they didn't necessarily yield that -8 immediately. I think you're set up well for the future. We'll discuss Dalot as well, because that's a really interesting one. He is one of my potential transfers in this week in order to get a Man City mid. But did you watch the Man U game? They weren't convincing, were they?
It's one of those things, you get all excited getting in a Man United double up, triple up, some wildcarders did with De Gea as well. And then you see this and it's back to what you've seen, early season, very lethargic. One of the things that was very surprising was how tired they all looked. I mean, they had a midweek rest. None of them played the Champions League final game. So maybe it was the training, maybe it was just Norwich are much more robust now. I wasn't as pleased as I could have been. And you take your 9 points from Ronaldo and run, right, with the penalties we saw this weekend.
Absolutely. It was penalty central all the way through. Plenty of penalties to save our game weeks, with both captain options, Salah and Ronaldo, benefiting from that. You mentioned Josh King there. It was a surprise position that he took up for most of that Brentford game. A little bit concerning for us owners. Do you think that that's going to continue, or do you think it might revert?
think even during the game, from what I saw, I didn't watch the game live, but from the highlights, they did keep switching around. Now, I think average positioning was a bit of a concern, whether that's because of the opponent, whether, Ranieri thought, Dennis is in form. He needs to start playing up front because he has an eye for goal. I don't know. The stats, one game isn't enough, but again, King was fine. I mean, Dennis scored off a XG of what, 0.2. Dennis, King had a better XG, couple of chances. I'm happy to hold. If people are looking to get somebody in now, again, you go back to the thinking of AFCON and other stuff, but it's one or the other. Both look good.
It's a really interesting dilemma, actually, because if you don't own either player, you can't really go for... Well, if you go for Dennis, you will have to transfer him out if he goes to the African Cup of Nations. And if you go for King, you're almost setting yourself up for the long run. But people who own King, like us, are almost tied into owning King. We can't really swap to Dennis. We can't justify that sideways move. Because of the short turnaround, you're almost wasting a transfer. But yeah, it's a very interesting dilemma. But we will look at those players in more detail later on. Last player to consider in your team is Ramsdale, 11 points. What an absolute revelation he's been this season. Plenty of saves and 7 clean sheets in 13 games is pretty impressive, right, Pras?
Amazing. I mean, the only bad thing about this game week was a lot of the Sanchez backers moved to De Gea this week, or maybe even Ramsdale. So a bit gutted about that, and we didn't get all the Ramsdale points to ourselves, and De Gea came in with a 10-pointer as well. But very happy owning Ramsdale. They're conceding a lot of weak shots from outside the box. Where have we heard that before? The Nick Pope and the Martinezes of the world. I wouldn't still say Arsenal's defense is elite. I think even the Palace defense, from overall numbers, we'll see yours in the last 6 game weeks, is doing well. But look, Ramsdale looks on it. It's one of those things where that this keeper is, much like De Gea in many of the games. Indeed, this Norwich game, you just know that he's on top of his game. He's not going to make a mistake. So you have much more confidence backing a keeper like that.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the fact that you've got Dalot means that you can probably get access to that Man United defence at a slightly cheaper rate. So makes sense. Let's move on to talk about my team. It is very similar to yours, apart from basically I have Alonso and Rafinha as opposed to your Foden and Dalot, which is coincidentally part of my transfer plans. I think I will be moving out Alonso to probably Dalot and upgrading Rafinha to a City mid. Not sure who just yet, probably Bernardo Silva. But 64 points for me. I didn't take a hit, and in a week which probably did justify taking a hit, but unfortunately, you don't know whether that's going to pay off before the game week. So I was just trying to keep it sensible. 2 free transfers, and I brought in Ronaldo and Bowen for Tony and Son, who were both out through COVID positive. So I think it made sense, and obviously happy to have that Ronaldo penalty. We'll talk about the West Ham assets because they were held to a frustrating draw at Burnley, but I watched that game and they were clearly the better side, West Ham. So I'm not losing hope too much. Antonio is still a massive enigma for me, but there were glimmers of hope for Antonio. He was taking more of a central position in that game, and hopefully that continues against weaker opposition. So that West Ham double up, yeah, not sure. Holding my breath at the moment.
Fixtures, right? I mean, I think it's still the right play. But on your transfers, I think you were very in a great position that you could get the 2 guys most people were taking hits for, which is Bowen and Ronaldo going into the week. And look, I mean, Alonso got you the assist. I think this week, this midweek, Chelsea are over 50% for a clean sheet. So it's a long-term move that you could think about. But we'll talk about your team when we get to it in the end. But great place to be in as well.
For sure. It's very frustrating that Reece James has only got 1 point in the last 4 games. I can't really believe that, to be honest, because he just looks so attacking. Well, he's taking up such attacking positions for a defender, and he's so technically capable. I just don't doubt that he'll be amongst the FPL points at some point again. Alonso, obviously his assist was welcome, but out of the 2, I think it's probably Alonso that makes way. He's not really cutting the mustard as he did at the start of the season, and indeed as we have experienced Alonso's attacking potential in previous seasons. So that seems the one for me. But yes, other than that, not too much to elaborate on compared to your team. So we can move swiftly on and talk about the fixtures. So we've got Top of the fixture ticker here is Man United. Unsurprisingly, plenty of good fixtures to target. And it seems like Ronaldo is the go-to, and Dallo or Alex Telles maybe one of those left backs, one of the right backs to target. Is there anyone else that you would consider from Man United at the moment, Praz?
Other than De Gea, I mean, not that keeper transfers are top of anyone's priority, but if people are stuck on a goalkeeper they're not happy with, then De Gea is a good option. Ranić has said that he's first choice, so that would be the one. I mean, a word on Dallo in the press conference today. Ranić has said that Wan-Bissaka is fit. Whether that means he starts is another story, but if you think about the fact that it's a quickish turnaround, midweek game, can you see Wan-Bissaka starting? I wouldn't rule it out, not to scaremonger anyone, but I definitely still think Dallo is first choice for the price, 4.5 million. If Wan-Bissaka starts, it's very unlikely that Dallo comes on because Wan-Bissaka is a fit. I mean, it's not like Aspi starting and James comes on to cameo because it's you're taking over somebody much older whose legs are tired on the wing back. I mean, Wan-Bissaka is fine. So that's the only caveat on Dallo. I think Tellers is even one step riskier because of Shaw. I mean, you'll have the media asking Ranić every single game, why aren't you playing Shaw? What's wrong with Shaw? Because of the England factor. So he'll have this inherent pressure to kind of give him a chance. And even though I think Tellers is doing fine, he works well in that system, much like Dallo. I think he will see lesser minutes and see more rotation with Shaw.
Yeah,
But nothing
100%.
on the midfielders now. Sorry, nothing on the midfielders for now. Rashford looked terrible in the Norwich game. We just don't know what's happened to him. It's his upfront role. He usually likes that. He gets the freedom. He can press. He can then make a run when Ronaldo receives the ball. Just didn't see it. I wouldn't be surprised if Greenwood starts midweek.
Yeah, he didn't look very sharp. He lost the ball plenty of times, I think, when we were watching the game. They brought up a graphic, which was the amount of times Man United players had lost the ball in the opponent's half. So, yeah, not a great showing from Man United, and definitely a wait and see in some of their assets. But as you say, Tellez and Dallo seem to be the preferred options on the wing backs, on the full backs, I should say. But for the price, I think it's probably worth that rotation risk right now. It remains to be seen whether Shaw and Wan-Bissaka regain their places. Next on the fixture ticker, we've got West Ham, and Antonio and Bowen are points of what we're going to talk about those later. And I think with those fixtures, having one is probably a really good idea, if not both. I really just want Antonio to gain some form. I can't believe we've all retained him. Well, I mean, some of us didn't, but he's still at 40% ownership, which is absolutely mad. And I can only justify that by saying that there weren't really any other forward options to move from. So it's a bit of a strange one, but I think
it's one of those classic FPL dilemmas, right? You've held on to the guy. He has numbers over the season, albeit, last few haven't been as great, but he has numbers. He has history to justify holding him. But somehow you just watch West Ham and the ball comes in, it just ghosts him. I mean, he's in the box. I do agree with you. In this game, he was more central. But, if Bowen is cutting back, it goes to Souček. If, Benrahma is crossing the ball, it goes to Bowen. He's just in there, but like a ghost, not involved in stuff. And I just don't know how to explain that. And with these fixtures, you have to say, you have to hold him, right? At least for the next 3, I think.
100%. I think he's positionally astute enough to take up the right positions, and all we need him to do is tap the ball into the net in some of these easier fixtures. And I think Bowen will be able to assist him in a couple of those situations. I think West Ham are dynamic enough to create plenty of opportunities for him. So I completely agree with you. I think he's definitely a hold if you have him. And Arsenal, even though they're coloured as an amber fixture difficulty, they have the most defensive errors in the entire league and the most defensive errors leading to a goal. So I think there's plenty of opportunity in this game for West Ham boys. And then they've got Norwich and Southampton and Watford afterwards. So plenty of opportunities. We'll talk about those later. The third one is Crystal Palace, and Conor Gallagher scored 2 goals. Was it yesterday? Yes, it was yesterday.
Yes, yeah.
He seems like the go-to 6-point 6.1 million option, right, Praz?
Yeah, he is. I mean, the thing with him is, I think we all know that the three in midfield, that affects where Gallagher plays, right? I mean, when you have Kouyaté and Schlupp, then basically Gallagher is the DM or the guy helping out. When Schlupp isn't playing, then Gallagher is the number 10, and you have Hughes, who actually had a very good game. So when I saw the lineup yesterday, one of those things that you get completely right? I tweeted, well done, Gallagher owners. Schlupp's not starting. Of course, it turns out that the guy has a Messi-esque performance. But you have to think that Vieira will say that Hughes was a good pick. Hughes has had a history of injuries. So if he's cautious midweek, Gallagher owners, don't be disappointed if he's a little bit more withdrawn. But you have to hold on. If you have Gallagher with the fixtures that you see in your graphic as well, you just hope that 4 out of these 6 games, Gallagher is back to playing the Schlupp role. For anybody looking to buy him, I think a little bit more caution can be exercised simply because Eze is another factor. So Eze is also looking to play that Schlupp role. Whenever Eze will play, not in that front three, so let's say you have Edouard, Zaha, and Ayew again, then if Eze starts, then Gallagher will be withdrawn again. So it's just one of those things. If you have him the day he's playing number 10, you're in the points because he looks fantastic. That second goal was amazing.
Absolutely. Sorry, someone's just pointed out in chat that I've got the old presenter graphic. I've got FPL Sonaldo written under your Zoom window. So I fixed that for the next graphical move. So sorry about that, Praz. My error. There's so many.
One of the same.
Yeah, 2 goats in the same place. I mean, you're interchangeable, really, aren't you? So
Indeed.
So yes, we'll talk briefly about the rest of these teams on here. We've got Southampton with a couple of good fixtures. Livramento could be a bench option if you're benching Cancelo this week. He's playing Crystal Palace, but we have seen Crystal Palace's attacking prowess increase recently. So play at Livramento at your own risk. Next one is Watford, and we've got King and Dennis to discuss, but they've got 3 decent fixtures. Burnley, Crystal Palace and Wolves up next. Aston Villa are a team to talk about. Really impressive under Gerrard. Disappointing not to get a result against Liverpool, I thought. I thought they defended really, really well. And Norwich up next for them. Ollie Watkins could be someone to consider. I think he's probably the main option from Aston Villa. Is anyone else you would consider from Aston Villa, Praz?
I think I read somewhere Danny Ings is back. Not somebody I would recommend, but just keep an eye on whether he plays centrally. And if he does, he could be an option, not for Norwich, of course. Watkins is training. I saw his pictures this morning. So he's somebody who's not COVID affected, which becomes an important thing this time of the year. I like their defense as well. I mean, Gerrard has a track record of attacking wing backs, and Matty Cash looks interesting. I mean, Target may rotate with Young, but Cash looks to have nailed the right back spot. So I'm actually eyeing up. If I was not going Dallo and I had a little bit of money, so one for you to think about, then Matty Cash is an interesting one. And then one off-piste one is McGinn. So McGinn looks a little bit more attacking as well on set pieces, always has a goal in him. But these are the guys. But great fixtures. This is the type of things we should be looking at when Gerrard's coming in. How can you take advantage with the good fixtures? But Watkins for me also a standout.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. So we've got Burnley next. I'm not sure any particular Burnley players draw me to bringing any of them in for my FPL team. So I think we'll pass quickly through. And I think Everton, the last one on their list, probably, I echo the same thoughts about Burnley, really struggling at the moment, Praz, for any sort of form. And this unreliability without Calvert-Lewin, who is the main person they're missing at the moment, seems to me that any of those assets are just impossible to bring into your FPL team.
Yeah. I think with Everton, the calls for Benitez to be sacked are growing by the game. That Arsenal game, I think, was an aberration, their victory. Yesterday was really, really poor again. So I expect that a couple of games, if there's no improvement, then you have another new manager bounce coming in with DCL getting fit again. So we will be talking about them, maybe not under Benitez soon.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's one of the benefits of owning Antonio, actually. His price point is pretty good to swap to DCL when the time arises, hopefully maybe game week 20, game week 21, because they do have a good run of fixtures from game week 19 specifically. But enough about fixtures. Let's talk let's move to our first talking point, which is defence. And we've got Everton and Leicester up there as one of the worst defences. It's absolutely it's so surprising for me, but do we target Leicester for like captaincy and this sort of stuff? They're really conceding a lot of chances here, especially the big ones.
This is why I love this chart of yours. I mean, XG doesn't capture the amount of big chances Leicester is. I mean, it captures it, but you could concede a lot of small ones, and it would still show that you're poor in your XG conceded. The big ones, I mean, Leicester is just giving up goals by game, and you can see that even while watching their games. You guys, if you have Kane, good captaincy shout this Thursday. I know it hurts for a lot to think that, but this is how narratives changed every season, right? I mean, who would have thought that Everton and Leicester are the teams to target if you wanted to get
bonkers
goals for your team?
Completely bonkers. And I think that sometimes we forget that Everton and Leicester are really struggling at the back this season, and we go back to that the official FPL FDR rating, which probably are rated around a 3, and you go, oh, that's a middling fixture, but actually, Chelsea are playing Everton this week, and I wouldn't be surprised if they put 3 or 4 past Everton, and that does make me worried. Selling a Chelsea wing back in Alonso and Reece James, I get immediately punished for hedging my bets a little bit. So it's really, really confusing, like what to do. I think I need to do it because Chelsea's fixtures, sorry to detract from Everton, but Chelsea's fixtures in 3 or 4 game weeks time become Liverpool, City, whoever, and then 2 blank game weeks. So it seems like you have to move away. But yeah, I can see them really destroying Everton this week.
And a word on Leicester, I think Johnny Evans also limped off yesterday, if I remember. There's no update yet, but you can imagine that they're even worse without Johnny Evans. So Spurs playing Leicester, Chelsea playing Everton, I think both decent shouts. If in a world where there was no Ronaldo, even Lukaku is a great shout this week.
So yeah, another couple of teams here, which I think are displaying as a little bit harsh, West Ham and Wolves. And I'm going to put this down to them playing quite a lot of difficult opposition in recent weeks. I think both of them have been pretty solid teams when it comes to defence. And I think we can probably see when their fixtures ease, in this case, West Ham's fixtures are easing now, those 2 teams to move down to the bottom left, further down to the bottom left, I should say. I think if you own the likes of Sarr in goal for Wolves, I think you should be very happy. He's one of the best performing goalkeepers, and Wolves are doing a great job of keeping it solid at the back. Do you think he's the second best goalkeeping option, Sarr at Wolves? Is De Gea even come close? I'm not sure.
For his price, I think people have been burnt by Guaita. I like Guaita as well for his price. But Sarr, just, let's keep football or FPL out of it. From a football perspective, he's been really impressive this season. I've really liked his shot-stopping ability, the way Wolves play. I mean, it reminds me of the Brighton model. You keep the ball and, your press is very good. You just don't know how these teams go after Christmas, though. Typically, these teams tire out, your press becomes weaker, and your defense really suffers unless you have a big squad, which Wolves don't. So wait and watch for me with the fixtures. I was happy to say, give Wolves defense a miss. But overall, I think Sarr is a great addition. I like him a lot.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think you made it on Burning Questions with Andy that over this Christmas period, the squads that are deeper and can rotate more are more likely to steamroll the thinner squads, and I think that's something that might come to fruition. So definitely interested to maybe track that squad depth. The likes of Watford, Burnley, Brentford, we might see some capitulation there. We will see. But not too many obvious options from Wolves, as you say, and not too many options from West Ham either in defence. Aaron Cresswell is the obvious one, but he's out injured. Coufal, I should say Soufal is the correct way to pronounce it apparently. He's been getting forward a bit. Does he interest you at all with their good run of fixtures?
He was the Game Week 1 darling for a lot of us. His stats last year were absolutely amazing. It's the reasons why he's lost that right back spot to Johnson, who then moved left back, then got injured. Now Masuaku is playing there. It's just an area where it's difficult to go into right now. By the way, West Ham's defense, as you've mentioned here, but even across the season, has been okay. So you could do better with your money, unless it's Johnson, which is 4.0, and that's then a really enticing option. I don't think there's anybody I particularly like. I mean, Dawson's always been good for a header on a corner. There've been many in seasons past, but not particularly.
The one team that surprises me on here, no, actually, I lie. The two teams that surprise me are Norwich and Palace. Norwich really have improved in the last 6 game weeks. I don't know whether that's to do with fixture opposition, but I mean, they've just played Man United, and those numbers are pretty impressive. Dean Smith has clearly done a decent job. It's a pity Norwich lack any sort of final, what's the word, like final effort. They just couldn't convert, or I mean, everything that they got, they scuffed or something like that. So it's a pity. End product was the word I was looking for.
In one of your charts, Kabak is going to come up as very, very high. He had 2 amazing chances. Any other, I mean, Van Dijk would have scored a brace against us. Look, I think Dean Smith has got them organized. You expect that. I mean, we always get excited with a new manager on, this striker is going to score a hat trick or this midfielder is the one to go for. Usually the answer is their defense is the one to go for. You see that with Davis, Reguilon. You see that with, now we're talking about Dalot and De Gea. Same with, and I'm not suggesting we go with Norwich defense, but that's the first thing managers address when they come in, is their defense. And you can see that. And one of the things about this midweek is, of course, Dean Smith plays Villa, and that will give him some extra incentive to do well against his old team.
100%. So Tottenham are an interesting one here because clearly Conte's had an effect on them. They're really, really low for big chances conceded, along with Palace and City. A lot of FPL managers were on Reguilon, and you were on Davis, which was proved to be an inspired move before any of the games were called off with that 15-point haul, I think it was. We're interested to see about whether we can get back on the Spurs' defensive solidity once their fixtures start up and running again. So I don't know whether their training ground has reopened yet, Pras, do you know?
I do, yeah. They were training yesterday, apparently, and Conte really ran them through the rigor yesterday, is what the headline was from The Athletic. Now, we don't know who it was who was training, because obviously, for example, for me, Davis had COVID, apparently. So he's not one of those that would have trained. But the ones who have trained, I think they should look fine. I'm big on Spurs defense. Of course, the chart you have, obviously, this is per match, but this is 4 games compared to the other 6. But they have looked much better defensively. I have to admit, I would have gone Reguilon had I had the funds, but I preferred Davis to whoever's on the right side, which was Emerson at the time. Their fixtures are really good in that crunch period, which is the Boxing Day to New Year's, the 3 games in those 6 days. So I liked Davis for that reason, that I can put him on the bench. The week that I really need him, he can be there for rotation or anybody else who misses out. And then, of course, there's a double game week potentially, or 2 double game weeks that need to be rescheduled. Hopefully that happens, in the next 10 game weeks. So that's another incentive to go for Spurs.
Yeah, there was talk about them forfeiting the European game, which means that they're out of that competition, which gives them plenty of free game weeks to play those extra fixtures. So, yeah, lots of double game weeks on the horizon for Spurs. Definitely keep an eye out for that. The last team I want to talk about on this chart is Chelsea. And I know we're talking about getting rid of double Chelsea defence for those who are still on it. But this chart sort of suggests that they have been okay defensively, and maybe conceding those goals has been a little bit of a red herring in terms of predicting the future. So coupled with the juicy Everton game for Chelsea, I just know that I'm going to transfer out Alonso and he's going to get a mega haul. Very, very annoying. But I think probably...
I mean, Chelsea's defense, right? Sorry, I interrupted.
No, go on.
No, I was going to say I guess the defense still is solid, but as you see with Man United, it's not the defenders, but actually the shield in front of you. I mean, with Kovacic, Jorginho, Kante, they just have lacked that shield, so they are conceding the chances, not to the extent where you think they're not a good defense anymore, but it's more than the elite numbers that they were showing maybe in the middle of the season or middle of the early season. And then you have, Alonso replacing Chilwell. It was the Alonso mistake that led to the goal. So you just, he's not the same defender that Chilwell is. So it is obviously a much more makeshift, outfit, but it is still Chelsea, and they are expected, I think, 50% plus percentage clean sheet odds this midweek, and it's still Alonso. So I wouldn't rule it out that he comes back to hurt anyone who sells, like myself last week, or potentially you.
Oh no, don't say that, Praz. I'm
I'm not going to
already.
be as negative as Ronaldo was on your transfers, by the way, from last Monday. I remember.
Oh no, I hope it doesn't happen. But I think long term it is probably the optimal move. So I think I probably will still move them out. But I
Right.
think those who want to keep double Chelsea defence, I think it's still fully justified. I think the fixtures that they have upcoming, I think they've got Everton, I think they play Wolves, Aston Villa, and Brighton, all
Awesome.
not. Yeah, massively attacking teams. They're normally teams that contain the game very well, but only score maybe 1 or 2 goals. So against Chelsea, I think Chelsea have got some very, very good clean sheet potential against those teams. So, speaking of Chelsea, let's have a look at their individual defensive players. I've got a defensive chart coming up here. I've left Ben Chilwell on here, top right, just to benchmark against what a wonder he was before he got injured. So this is basically a graph of small attempts versus big attempts. Attempts means shots and chances created, basically those underlying stats that may lead to an attacking return, split into the difficult ones being the small attempts and the easy ones being the big attempts. And this is on a per appearance basis. And it's not surprising to see Alexander-Arnold, Cancelo and Reece James on the right-hand side of the graph. Very, very busy in games. And that's why we've loaded up on them. But interestingly, there is a massive disparity between Alonso and what Chilwell was displaying before he got injured. And that is, I think if anyone watched their games, you could probably come to that conclusion yourself. But it's just another nail in the coffin for Alonso for me. So that's probably going to be my transfer out this week. But interesting to see Robertson make a reappearance. And you mentioned Kabak as well, both top for big attempts this week. Have you seen a resurgence in Robertson? Does he now become a viable option for Liverpool?
In a world where Jota doesn't exist and Firmino is all fit and they share their minutes, but as a third option, I mean, we're not selling Trent or Salah, so then it comes to a straight shootout between Jota and Robertson. Or you could also look at the opportunity cost of not having a Cancelo or a James. We just go for those and have Jota instead, right? I mean, that's why we've ended up in this setup. But you and I remember 2 years ago, Robertson was the guy, 0.5 cheaper or not, he was the guy to get. It's almost like, you remember after the international break, there were some calls on Tsimikas starting because Robertson was looking leggy. And he's just said, okay, I'm going to show you guys. It's strange how this stuff happens, right? Not stats can never account for it. But it's completely turned his last 3 games versus what he'd done in the first 12 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's nice to see him click back into his previous form because he, as you say, he did look a bit leggy. But I think he's maybe that threat from Tsimikas has spurred him on to emulate his previous year's performances. Kabak, I don't think necessarily we need to start bringing him in. I think he is just a representation of his really good chances against Man United at the weekend. Another talking point on here is the Man United boys, Dalot and Telles, and obviously not specifically that good stats right now, but have we seen glimmers of hope that they might start getting maybe some attacking returns in these easy fixtures?
Yeah, I mean, look, for example, for Dalot, this is last 6 game weeks, right? If I see this correctly. So, I mean, we're talking he's only played 2 of them. Again, this is per appearance, but he's not had enough time to show what he can do. As I said, Norwich fixture was a little bit of a surprise to all the fans. We were expecting gung-ho, us again putting pressure on them. It just didn't pan out. It remains to be seen. I'm still quite optimistic because he is an attacking fullback. He is the guy. He's actually, even during Ole's time, there were a couple of times where Ole played him actually in the Greenwood or Sancho position, which is the right forward. So he is capable of those crosses, of putting in attacking numbers. And the Crystal Palace game was a better representation of what he could bring to the table. He was getting in the box. He actually had a couple of shots as well. So look, I mean, Dalot is a great option. The only risk with Dalot is he has one bad game and then he gives Wan-Bissaka a chance and then he has a great game. And then, so you can never say he's nailed. You can simply say that he's preferred at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the dilemma for managers such as myself who maybe want to upgrade their midfield. What 4.4, 4.5 defender do you go for? Dalot seems the obvious option at the moment, but with that price, you potentially make a transfer dilemma for yourself down the line when or if Wan-Bissaka reclaims his place. So that's the risk you take. But I think I might be tempted to make it anyway. I just wanted to have a look at some timelines of the Chelsea mid. So I'll start with Alonso here. You can see he's played the last 4 games, 1 assist in the last one. But if you look at that XGI per 90 rolling average, it is minimal. It is very, very unimpressive. And just to compare that to the likes of James, we saw a massive increase and around game week 11. This is the last 4 game weeks rolling average. So around that time, this was when James was getting all of his attacking returns. Since then, it does worry me that it has fallen away a little bit, but not so much that it worries me about keeping. I think he's still a much better asset than Alonso is in comparison. Just to look at Rudiger as well. Rudiger's attacking XGI is still fairly good for a centre back. We've seen him maraud forward and taking plenty of pot shots from the edge of the area, and he's got a good strike on him, hasn't it, Pras? I wouldn't be surprised to see getting some more goals.
It's almost like he's just a greedy defender, which is weird, right? I mean, he shouldn't be as greedy to score and to be in the box, but you just see him when even if Chelsea's 2-0 up, you just see him hanging around the box, taking shots. That's why he's got a couple of penalty assists as well. I mean, he's in there scruffing it out, and he gets those decisions. Plus, he takes the odd shot sometimes. You see him running from the halfway line towards the box as well. Would you rather have Rudiger or James? Of course, you'd rather have James. But for those who had the double up, went Rudiger or stayed with Rudiger, actually have really benefited, for example, this week.
Yeah, I think that's the only justification that you can possibly give Rudiger, is that he is probably rotation proof. You've seen that he's played the 90 minutes in the last 8 games. But I think Reece James, because of his technical capabilities, is almost undroppable too. And he seems super fit, super energetic. I wouldn't be surprised if he continues over Christmas playing most of the games. So James, definitely my preferred option. But if you have Rudiger, absolutely no reason to get rid whatsoever. I think he's a good option.
There was one worrying bit over the Champions League. Maybe it was just an experiment. Did you see where James played centre mid and, defensive mid and, was completely non-attacking? I wouldn't understand, unless it's an emergency, why Tuchel would play him there, given that he's so good in his crossing when Lukaku's back. I mean, I'm excited as a James owner once Lukaku is back in the team as well. But that's just a little bit worrying. And a word on Alonso, I saw in the chat somebody mentioned, again, not to talk you out of it, but Coleman's been pretty poor on that side for Everton. So that'll be a good matchup for Alonso.
Oh, you're not making this easy for me, Pras. I need to transfer out Alonso. Goodness me, this is going to make my decision even harder. Interesting point you made about James. He definitely did play central midfield, European, but interestingly, watching the game at the weekend, even though he was meant to be playing right wing back, I definitely saw a few occasions where he drifted into midfield. I don't know whether that's a mindset that he just suddenly starts doing that now, and whether that affects his points potential. I don't know. I don't think I mind so much as long as he gets forward and has the capability of crossing the ball into the box. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything to worry about specifically. It is a little bit of a worry that XGI per 90 is on the down, but I think with these fixtures coming up, I think, yeah, Chelsea can get something and Reece James will be back amongst the points. Right, let's go on and talk about attackers. Let's just move into 1 second and transition. Nice. Right, this is the main bread and butter of the video. Lots of attacking players to think about here, and I think some of the comparisons we need to make are King versus Dennis. We're going to talk about those. Which City mid to have? Sterling absolutely kicking ass top right of this chart here, which is kind of surprising. He's doing better than Salah in the statistics department, which is crazy. Do you think he keeps his place, Sterling, over this Christmas period, or is he going to be subjected to the City rotation?
Sterling thing has completely, we had a narrative. We were almost getting to predict Pep because Jesus was playing on the right, Foden was playing up top. You had Grealish on the left, sometimes Foden on the left. And now suddenly Jesus is playing up front and Sterling is on the right. And I have no idea if this is because Jesus doesn't like to play on the right anymore, or if he needs to, if he wants to fit in Sterling, the right hand side is the only place. Add to the fact that now Grealish is back into the mix, KDB is back into the mix. And Pep said in his conference today that everyone is fit, barring Ferran Torres. So I just have, I usually Pep gives players a go if they're doing well. So I would think Sterling, continues to play with the obvious caveats of rest and rotation. But shout out to Flapjack, who got Sterling in last week and benefited from the points, the penalty. But I think Sterling's doing fine. His numbers are looking great. But don't be surprised if he misses the next two. That's just what Pep does.
I think you're absolutely spot on. Well, I've brought Sterling's timeline up here, but in terms of the City starting 11, it's a meritocratic society, football. Pep isn't just going to rotate for the sake of it. He wants his best players on the pitch. That's why Bernardo Silva's been playing most of them. We've got Sterling here, who's been playing he's played the last 5 minutes, pretty much every minute of it. And you can see that those stats there in the last 5 games have been really, really good. Obviously, ignoring the penalty, we've got the big turquoise bar on the right-hand side with the white border. That signifies his XG for the penalty that he took. Other than that, his XG wasn't that high against Wolves, but obviously he'll take the goal. But other than that, the XGI per 90, which doesn't include the penalty XG, has been really strong and fluctuating at a really decent level comparative to Salah, it has to be said. So if Sterling keeps his place, could be definitely a bit of a differential pick if you can afford that price point in your team. Are you tempted at all?
Well, I made my bet with Ronaldo. I think you can't go Salah, Ronaldo, and Sterling. I think people who held on to Son for whatever reason, if the Spurs game, and by the way, I'm reading Spurs have another positive case as a first team player, so you just never know if their game is going ahead. So if you have Son, you had a free transfer, you could punt for Sterling. I think last week was the week to do it though. But yeah, I mean he's a good pick with the numbers that he's showing. I personally am on Foden, as you know. The City midweek games have actually fallen very kindly as well because they play tomorrow, which is Tuesday, and then they play on Sunday. So there's actually a very large period or gap between the two games. So our whole logic of this guy plays midweek and he won't play on the weekend, this won't really apply, I think, because Tuesday, Sunday is a decent amount of time. So as somebody who owns Foden, I'm hoping now that he's got his 35 minutes, he plays on Tuesday and then again on Sunday. And you can't have any two big fixtures better than Leeds and Newcastle at the moment. So, looking forward to those two.
It's a really interesting subject matter, whether or not to go Foden, Gundogan, Bernardo Silva. I think almost Gundogan is the most pressing talking point because alarming comments from Pep about how he's managing an injury and how he maybe can't sustain the minutes that he has been playing in recent game weeks. So that sort of screams to me, even though he's got some decent stats, maybe some of the other options are a little better. Do you think that might be a prudent approach?
Again, from this morning, Pep says everyone's fit. So, a question that every Gundogan owner now faces is, should I hold him or shall I, if I have the money and a free transfer, shall I just move him to a Bernardo or a Foden? I think if I was comparing the three, a fit Foden for me is the number one, both in terms of stats over a long period, the way I see him influencing the games when he comes on. For me, between Bernardo and Gundogan comes down to minutes. Whoever you think will get more minutes, and I think at the moment it's Bernardo who will get more minutes, even though Gundogan has better stats. This would just put me off a little bit. Back pain during Christmas. This is, by the way, true of Alonso as well. I think Tuchel said this of Alonso a week ago, that he has back pain, which was exactly the confirmation bias I needed to move him on. You just never know, right? I mean, I fell into this a week ago with Foden, where he said he's got a niggle with his toe. You can never sell him because you never know what a niggle means. Is he going to play? And what eventually happened is, I think the first game a week ago, he was subbed off 58th minute, where I lost out 2 points, the clean sheet and the second point for appearance. This week, he was obviously a sub. Hopefully it pays off. Otherwise, I'll be burnt holding Foden this whole time. And unfortunately, Gundogan owners are in the same boat. I mean, if Gundogan starts, will he get subbed off on the 58th minute? You cannot rule it out. Or maybe he's a sub. So you're now in this decision where, either you hold or sell. If you could go Bernardo or Foden, for me, I would still do it. And if you had no other issues in the team, I would still do it, just because once a player has a niggle, a rest is coming with Pep.
I completely agree. I think Foden or Bernardo Silva are the ones to go for in this City team. And if maybe you can afford Sterling, then maybe go for him. But in the mid-price category, Foden or Bernardo Silva. I just wanted to look at the timelines for each of these players. Gundogan here, plenty of volatility in his minutes over the last 10 game weeks. But that XGI per 90 has been pretty good, and it's accelerated in the last few game weeks, but this is because he's positionally very astute. He gets to that penalty spot for those tap-ins, and I remember when De Bruyne came on, he crossed an excellent ball for Gundogan, which was cleared off the line by Cody Wolves, and that's the sort of chances that Gundogan absolutely
lucky there.
Absolutely. So this is the sort of thing you can expect from Gundogan if he continues to play. You can see in the last two games, 67 minutes, 56 minutes. Now that does scream to me that he might keep starting games, but his minutes might be continued to be managed. That's due to the back injury that he's continually managing. So if you are a Gundogan owner, I don't think a sideways move is necessarily your priority, but maybe it's something to think about if you don't have any other fires to fight. Let's go on and talk about your man, Mr. Phil Foden. He's had a couple of games missing in 13 and 14, but he's come back in 15 and 16, played over 100 minutes, and that XGI per 90 has rocketed. So you should be very encouraged, I should say. Ever since Brighton, where he played the false nine position, the XA, the orange bars, has become more of a priority for Foden. But watching him against Wolves, the 34 minutes he did play, he had a few decent shots on target. So I'm not 100% sure whether that's an accurate diagnosis of his new role on the left. I think he's probably going to be a dual threat regardless, right?
Yeah, although this game in particular, he actually took up the left center mid, which was, well, at least it looked to me from the eye watching the game. Grealish continued until KDB came on, continued on the left. You had Foden on the left center mid. He was very central to be, usually when he plays on the left, sometimes he can hug the touchline too much. As a result, I think this game week, him and Jota, despite the cameos, were in the top 3 or 4 for non-pen XG, which is incredible, right? I mean, these two guys who cameoed and got 1-pointers, if people own them, if they start, they're exceptional picks for their price.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I like Foden a lot.
Yeah, I think Foden is arguably my favourite option as well, but sadly just can't quite get to him in terms of the price point. So Bernardo Silva is the one that I'm eyeing up. Let's bring up
What do you think of Bernardo then?
It's a very difficult one, because when we talk about stats, we always talk about overperformance. We know that Bernardo Silva is overperforming, but we can also talk about technically very capable players such as Maddison, Rafinha, all of those very, very gifted players that just don't really need the stats. We talk about Vardy, we talk about Son, these clinical players, and there's plenty of evidence to suggest that XG doesn't necessarily need to be the be-all and end-all. And Bernardo is definitely emulating that sort of philosophy this season. I think he's been super consistent in both minutes, in stats, in clinicalness, and I think, why not? I'm being super late to the party why not get on him? Because it was super torture. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was going to say I don't hate it. I mean, there's a very big divide with the analytical community with Bernardo, which is fine. They had that with Lingard last year, even with Gundogan the year before. It's fine. My only point to watch out with Bernardo is once KDB starts, the best numbers or the best points that he's delivered is in the right center mid position, which is basically historically the KDB position. What happens to now? I'm not suggesting Bernardo doesn't start. I think he's absolutely nailed to start. Does he move to the right? So that impacts Sterling. Does he play left center mid? Maybe that's the most likely solution. But then he hasn't been as effective in that position. So not scaremongering at all. I think Bernardo is a good pick. He's going to get a lot of minutes. And when you get a lot of minutes in the City team that is scoring a lot of goals, under 8 million, it's a no-brainer. So, I mean, if people are looking at Bernardo and Foden, go for both if you can afford it. I mean, this is it's City we're talking about. They'll probably win the league, probably score the most goals. And outside of Jota, I don't see anybody else in that price that even comes close to those guys.
Yeah, the only position you didn't mention there was potentially a false nine, which Bernardo has taken up occasionally. So we will see. I mean, obviously, as a potential owner, that does excite me a little bit. But obviously, Foden can play there. A lot of other players can play in that false nine. So we sort of returned from Jesus playing in that position the weekend. So definitely one to watch out for. But as you say, I think Bernardo's nailed and is versatile enough to play in plenty of different positions. But we will see. Right, plenty of other players to talk about on here rather than focusing on the City. It is a good conversation, City mids. It's a massive enigma for me still. But let's move on to the Watford boys. And this is another dilemma for most FPL managers. Josh King, who was the stats darling recently, I think plenty of people were convinced by his opportunity, his potential. But Dennis is just absolutely putting pave to that. He is in red hot form, just clinical as any other player. And you can see from the chart here that the numbers inside the bubble, above and below their names, represent the returns. The big returns at the top and the small returns, i.e. the difficult ones, at the bottom. And you can see that Dennis is averaging 0.8 returns, small returns, difficult returns per appearance. And that says it all. He's really, really overperforming. But sometimes overperforming doesn't mean a bad thing. It means a good thing. He's clearly full of confidence and taking his chances really, really well. So I just wanted to interestingly look at the timelines for these as per usual. We'll start with Josh King. And the thing that does worry me here is this drop-off in XGI per 90. We've seen from game week 9 to game week 13, loads and loads of XG and loads of goals. But since then, understandably, he has played Chelsea and Man City in the last 3 game weeks. But it was the Brentford one that surprised me most. And this dilemma that he was playing almost as a left mid, which really annoyed me. And I know you did say, Pras, that they were sort of interchanging, but most of the time Josh King did play on the left. So is Dennis the one now? I'm super confused. Do I feel kind of trapped with Josh King? I think I have to commit to him, right?
You have to. I mean, this is the Watford attack we're talking about. You're never going to use a transfer to go King to Dennis because ultimately, I mean, one would score 25, the other would score 18 or something. It's not going to be a huge delta. I hope not. We can't be that wrong, or the stats can't be that wrong. And I think a word on Dennis's overperformance. A lot of people miss the point that no shot that is scored is ever 1xG. So if a guy is scoring 5 goals in 5 games, at the end of it, he'll be overperforming his XG. Of course he will, unless he takes 6 shots and ends up only scoring 2. So I think the fact that he's over, Salah is, I think, 6 overperforming over the season or even more. So doesn't mean that that's a bad thing, going for a Dennis. But over time, if you watch the games as well, Kings just looks more threatening outside of this Brentford game. So I would give it one more game and we see how they look. If the positioning is still a concern, then I think we have a clear winner with Dennis. And for new owners, it might even be worth going to Dennis and then shifting during the AFCON. And the slight update on that is I think the Nigeria manager has been sacked, the guy who didn't like Dennis. So now, it is quite widely expected that Dennis will be called up. So you are really going for Dennis for the next, I think, 5 or 6 game weeks, and then you'll have to switch anyway.
I really hope it was just an exact plan against Brentford, the Watford and Ranieri's decision to put King on the left. I really hope that is rectified in the next game, and it was just specific to that
The Dennis
fixture.
owners are laughing at us, Ted. They are laughing at us.
100%.
Rightly so.
I'm laughing at myself. But yeah, hopefully King gets back among. Obviously, he's on penalty, so that is another string to his bow.
Of
But
all the games, we didn't get a pen in our game, or we did, but no one got it, obviously.
Obviously. So let's look at Dennis's one, and you can see that XG is sort of on the rise if you think about it over the 10 game weeks, but it's still at a fairly low level, a low consistent level. But what you can see is tons of goals, tons of assists against fairly decent opposition, and it's just so counterintuitive. I can't get my head around it, but fair play to the man. He's playing out of this world, and fair play to owners for owning him. I just fingers crossed that the world moves back around to King, and we can start getting some points. But yeah, fair play.
By the way, I'm reading in the chat, not to derail our conversation, but Man United are asking for a postponement, or it's being reported.
Oh my God!
They've
Okay.
had some positive cases, but we could use that as the backdrop of other things we discuss.
Yeah, I mean, we've got Cristiano Ronaldo here, the only Man United player, and some strong stats. We've both brought him in this week. If a Man United game, obviously this is just speculation, by the way, but if a Man United game was postponed, would that completely change your transfer plans, or would you keep Ronaldo?
I was going to hold, but I would switch to Lukaku for a week if that was the case.
Yeah, it's not a bad shout. Are you not worried about Lukaku not starting games in the last few?
I think he played the midweek and then he missed this one. So I'm hoping that this is the week, the midweek game is the one that he starts again. This is all with kind of thinking on our feet here with the news that's coming in. We'll have to give it a thought. I mean, I certainly set up the team, which we'll come to, thinking that I will roll. When we get to that, maybe we can think through or brainstorm what we would do if the United game doesn't happen. I mean, what weird times we live in, right? I mean, we thought we were done with all this last season, and now you can plan and plan and plan, and then things just happen.
No, goodness me, it does make the game very what's the word? Not exciting. I guess exciting is the word, but you really do have to be on top of your game, really on the ball, to really respond to these. It just seems like you have to take loads more hits in these sort of COVID seasons to adjust to a lot of these different barriers. We will have to see. We will have to wait for confirmation on that. Hopefully, it's not a last-minute thing and it derails a lot of our plans. But it's just another reason to have a strong bench this Christmas. Just try your best to get 15 playing players, and you should be a little bit more safe.
And wait till the last minute to make your transfers, because anything can happen.
Absolutely. It's really, really difficult to do that this season because there's a lot of players that we all want. And if you've got 0.0 left in the bank, it is very tempting to move early. But
I'm one to talk. I went like 4 days early last week. But yeah, as you said, if it's something that you really can't get to, then it's a different story. With midweek games anyway, you're talking only a couple of days, right? So going early means going a day before.
Yeah, 100%. Let's leave Man United chat there because we don't have any confirmation about that. But I think we'll cross that bridge when we come to it as FPL managers. We'll talk about the West Ham boys next. We've got Antonio and Bo in there, and Antonio's stats read sorry sight, don't they? Really, really poor stats. We've got glimmers of hope in that last Burnley game. But just to bring up his timeline, you can see that his XGI per 90 was pretty good back in game week 7, back into game week 10, and since then it's fallen away even further. Glimmers of attacking prowess against Chelsea with the assist potential. He actually did get an assist, but that was pretty fortunate for that Masuaku wonder goal. Just that Burnley game, he had a couple of shots here and there, but it's really nothing to shout home about, and it's super frustrating for those that have held all the way through. Can you see Antonio getting back to it? It's going to have to be one hell of a rectification, let's just say that.
It's one of those games where the thing with these easy fixtures is it can be a Burnley type, you don't score and then you get frustrated and then nothing happens. Or, you change the narrative, they get an early goal and it doesn't have to be Antonio. Anyone scores an early goal and suddenly the game is more open, the opposition doesn't sit back a lot, and then you have more space for Antonio, hopefully, to deliver. Look, I think I would back him. I mean, Pranil got him this last game week. So people actually do see the potential in him going forward. So certainly I wouldn't think of selling him unless there was an injury or any other concern. But in 3 game weeks, this is my timeline for him. And I know he has Watford as the fourth, but then I think for me, that's the timeline when DCL should come back. Ollie Watkins has played Chelsea. So I'm thinking Antonio gets 3 games without question. But after that, I need to really start thinking about it if he hasn't delivered, because there will be other options emerging in that price bracket.
Yeah, 100%. Let's fingers crossed he gets an early goal in the next game against Arsenal, because I think that probably is all that it takes. Just a little bit of confidence that floods back. And maybe in these easier fixtures, he starts getting the attacking stats that we all want. But I completely agree with you. I think it's not just holding a player. It's holding a player that has a price point that could move to pretty decent alternatives. So, yeah, completely agree with you. Not getting rid of Antonio at all. Let's move to Bowen as well. Slightly better stats on this chart. And you can see from the timeline, much better underlying stats in individual games. And I mean, I think he has 10 attacking returns in the last 12 game weeks. So arguably, he's in fantastic form compared to Antonio, who's only had 1 attacking return, 1 goal in the last 10 game weeks, which is just crazy. So Bowen seems like the guy. He's a completely different player to Antonio on all of the set pieces. So a lot of encouragement for Bowen, right?
Yeah, he was. I mean, I first time I owned him, watched the game. He looked very good. He looks confident on the ball, happy to shoot. He had a couple of decent chances. So very, very happy to own. For me, he's the guy who I'm happy to back through the good fixtures for West Ham, which is another 7, 8, maybe more game weeks. So he's going to be there. Amazing price as well. It's more Antonio who I question, but let's see how it goes.
Yeah, 100%. As someone who's doubled up on the West Ham boys, they better get their act together pretty soon.
Indeed.
I will be very upset if they don't. But
especially when Gallagher is delivering for the same price, Rafinha is delivering for the same price. It was the worst outcome for us who went for Bowen, given that you ended up benching Rafinha, right? And others who don't have Bowen have Mbeumo or Gallagher. Everybody else did well other than Bowen. But hopefully over the fixtures, this pays off.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the only thing that remains to be said on this chart is the bottom right-hand side guys, the Rafinhas, the Maddisons and the Gallaghers, all in the points recently, but all fit the bill as really technically capable, but not stat merchants. They're all overperformers, and it's another argument to say that the attacking stats aren't everything, and knowing that even if they have a lot of small attempts and not so many of the big attempts, if they are so technically capable to overperform consistently, there's no reason why we can't have them in our teams. Right. I was so close to bringing in Maddison a couple of weeks ago. I said I went for Bowen instead. But the problem is that Maddison had a poor game in game week 15. And I was going, oh, thank my lucky stars, I didn't bring in Maddison. Bowen's a much better option. And then Maddison goes and scores 3 attacking returns against Newcastle. So I think that probably emulates what these players embrace about the game. They are unpredictable to a certain extent, and you need to hold them long term in order to gain full benefit. So yes, I think I'll be selling Rafinha this week, sadly, because of the fixtures. But I mean, I don't begrudge anyone for owning Gallagher, Maddison or Rafinha. I think they're all excellent players. I think I've got some timelines for all 3. Rafinha, surprisingly, I've got his timeline here. His rolling average stats have decreased recently. I don't know whether that's to do with the fixture difficulties, but other than the 2 penalties, which this doesn't include, he's been falling away. I don't know whether that's to do with Leeds attacking prowess, Praz, but maybe Bamford. Oh no, Bamford's had a setback in his injury, hasn't he?
As he's out again, and Phillips. I think selling Rafinha is the right call now. I mean, yes, if you've owned him, you've benefited from the penalties, but you didn't really buy him for the penalties. If it's for everything else, penalties was a surprise. In a season where we're not getting penalties, Rafinha ends up getting 2 penalties as the non-penalty taker. Uh, it's been great if you've had the points, but I don't think this shouts sustainable returns going forward, at least for the next few. They still have a few tough fixtures to come. No Bamford, no Phillips. For me, screams struggling Leeds. So yeah, not looking great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know what to anticipate about this Man City Leeds game, because I remember when we've seen them in previous seasons, the Bielsa versus Guardiola face off, these two fantastic, intelligent managers going at it. And it has been kind of crazy games. So maybe Rafinha does unexpectedly get returned in this game. But I think just thinking about it from an optimal point of view, selling Rafinha doesn't seem like a bad idea at all. So yeah, we'll look at Gallagher. His 2 goals. I think he's obviously just super talented, because the stats aren't really there. And you talked about it earlier, Praz. Like, he, depending on the other players in that midfield, is the position that he plays. And I don't want to be subjected to that uncertainty every week. But he seems like the man to own at the moment. What am I doing wrong? Should I just bring in Gallagher?
3 very good fixtures coming up. And look, if you don't own, I think it's worth giving him 1 more week. If he starts, and I think he will, starts Hughes again, which means Gallagher, or not Schlupp, then I think Gallagher is a great pick. They are so attacking. They're looking good every game. I love this Crystal Palace team and the way they're set up. So he's quite pivotal. The only negative of Hughes starting is he wasn't on any of the set pieces. So you can't have everything with Gallagher. You can't have set pieces and attacking threat. Unfortunately, only one of the two. But out of the two, if you want something, you want him to be in the box and around the goals, which is what you got in the last game. Hughes got the assist from the corner, which Gallagher would have if he was taking the set pieces. I think he's a good option. But my problem, Ted, is how many midfielders can we go for? I mean, you have double City made, Salah, Jota, Bowen, Maddison we're talking about, Rafinha we're talking about, Mbeumo some people have, Brownhill I have, not that he's the guy to get, but there's just so many options that if it's not just about getting Gallagher, it's about who are you not getting instead of Gallagher, and that's what you need to think about.
Yeah, it's really difficult. I think I would have 7 or 8 midfielders if I could right this time. And that's the issue. With FPL, we go through cycles where we favour one position more than the other. And this will no doubt happen countless times over the season. Now we're moving away from big at the back, but big at the back was super popular like 5 game weeks ago. So, yeah, if you can have unlimited spots in your midfield, Gallagher for sure. And maybe when that happens, when we move away from midfield to maybe the forward line, we're going to need the likes of Gallagher to be an enabler to afford maybe some more expensive strikers. So for me, I still am going to ignore Gallagher, but hopefully he can be an option for me in the future.
Yeah.
Last player we've mentioned is Maddison, and another key overperformer of stats. How many attacking returns he had in his last 4 games? Like 7? Unbelievable. Full of confidence. Has he ever entered your mind, Praz?
I've been burnt too many times by the guy. I mean, every time he goes on this run, you fall for it, you get him, and then he goes not one, a bit like Antonio, but he does it every season. He looks great. He'll give an interview saying, I'm working on my attacking. I want to be in the goals, and then just nothing. I'm out of all the ones we've talked about, I'm the least keen on him, only because I don't fancy Leicester in terms of where they're going. I don't like their fixtures. I don't like how Maddison is when they play 2 up top. I know Iñárritu is injured, so maybe, but even with Vardy, they looked better last game with Daka and Barnes and Maddison. If they can play that, but I think Vardy will keep coming back. He's okay. I think whoever had him has done really well. I think Nick from Who Got the Assist has him. He did really well. Fair play, but I personally prefer Gallagher's and Rafinha's and the other City mids.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the ship sailed, sadly. You mentioned the fixtures there. Spurs and Everton up next. We mentioned Everton have some holes in their defence, so maybe he can capitalise there. But after those two, he has Man City and Liverpool up next. So 4 fairly difficult fixtures on paper. I don't think now is the time to bring in Maddison, but well done to all of you who own Maddison. Definitely escaped my clutches as well. But yeah, I think we'll leave it there on the attacking chart. Obviously, we've got Liverpool dominating with Jota, who loves to miss like an open goal, doesn't he? But I mean, he's just a staple in our sides.
I benched
Newcastle,
him and I was really panicking when I saw that chance. Even though I captained Salah, backing against Jota is just such a painful watch. If you're ever on Liverpool. By the way, on Jota, for those Maverick captainers, I think this week's Maverick captaincy is Jota, because they play Newcastle, who've looked terrible. And who would be more likely to get an early sub if they're 3-0 up? I think Salah is, given that he played the last game. So yeah, the one for those who want to take a punt, Jota versus Salah.
God, it's an interesting one because Jota, he's had an injury. I'm not 100% sure I would be ballsy enough to risk that.
I think he won't start? Yeah, maybe there's a chance he doesn't start again.
I mean, maybe he does. Maybe he does start, but maybe he just gets limited minutes. I'm not 100% sure on the fitness of Firmino as well. Apparently, he's been back in training. Not sure how far away he is. So Firmino could even get a cameo this game. Not sure. But as you say, if they're steamrolling Newcastle, then Klopp can ring in the rotation. But yes, I think the goals are definitely destined in that match, and I think Captain Salah seems the obvious opportunity. So I think that's probably what most people will do. Let's move on to the final graphic before we move to our teams, and this is the shot map. And some interesting reading for Bernardo Silva, shooting within 11 yards of the goal. And I've got an interesting graphic to actually supplement this with, and that is the actually I'm just going to pop it up here where he's shooting from. I'm not sure he's taken a shot outside the box in the last 6 game weeks, so I'm going to bring up his distribution of shots here. We've got the goal. I think he's had 12 shots in the last 6 game weeks, all of them in the box, but interestingly most of them on the right hand side at an angle to the goal. So he's clearly just perfecting that technique a little bit, and it is encouraging for Bernardo Silva owners. It's really, really nice to have a right centre mid who is shooting loads and loads in the box. And just to go back to his distribution, plenty of shots on target as well, which I guess would be natural to assume considering he is shooting fairly close to goal.
Yeah. I mean, but this is where the right centre mid thing comes in, right? Will he stay right centre mid when De Bruyne plays there? It's an interesting one. We don't know the answer yet, but I absolutely know he had a couple of chances in the last game. That's where he scored from that Gundogan phantom assist the game before as well. So I definitely see that places where that's where he's getting in. And with Pep, I think taking a shot from outside the box, I think only KDB is allowed to do that anyway. So I'm not surprised to see him shooting a lot from inside the box.
That's a good point, actually. I think the nature of Man City and the way they play try to work it as much as possible. Yeah, Cancelo takes plenty of shots from outside the box.
Oh yes, that's true. He's the other one. He's KDB light anyway.
KDB light with clean sheet potential. Love it. No wonder no one's selling Cancelo this week. Maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, plenty of opportunity to discuss this. I mean, Pukki's an interesting one. I mean, obviously Norwich have had a little bit of a boost in recent weeks under Dean Smith, but the issue with Pukki is just the Norwich team just don't have much end product, and Pukki has struggled a little bit with his conversion compared to other players as well. He's on penalties, but I think he's like 5.2 million or something. So if you need someone cheap at that price bracket, then Pukki's probably the one to opt for. Jota there at the top. I just can't get my head around Jota. You can see 19 shots and the vast majority are off target, even though he's shooting from within 10 yards. How is that even possible? And I guess that was anticipated by the chance that Salah created for him at the end of the Aston Villa game. And Pras, you were probably going, "No, please don't score."
Yeah. Terrifying moment. But look, I think all you can say is you'd rather have your player in the box taking the shot than not. People obviously hated Werner for this last year. This has continued. But with Jota, at least he gets enough chances. He's playing for a team that is the most attacking. So even if he takes, I always use Andy Cole as the guy when I was growing up as the guy who'd get 20 chances and then score one and then be on the top of the charts of goal scorers in, I'm talking 94, 95. And you'd think, as Man United fans, you would think he's so useless. I mean, he's always missing. But then as opposing fans, they would always say he's an amazing player because he's scoring so many goals. Obviously, there was no XG then to show that he was completely missing all his shots and doing terribly. So, look, Jota is, I think, a game breaker as long as Firmino is not fit, which may not last for a very long time. And so we'll have an interesting period between when Firmino is fit and Salah goes to AFCON, where people might choose to hold or jump off Jota. But as long as Firmino is not there, he's the guy.
God, I mean, I'd love to know whether people have gone back to 94, 95 and tried to emulate that XG for old games. I wonder whether that's actually been done or not. It'd be interesting to see. But yeah, a new world these days, I'm afraid, with all of these complicated stats. But they're useful for FPL, predicting the future and all that. We've got Ronaldo there with 19 shots. That's encouraging because he hasn't been on this chart, on the shots map, which is normally filtered for the highest shooters in recent weeks. He's getting some form, plenty of shots. He seems like the guy for Man United. Obviously, we have to keep an eye on this potential postponement, but encouraging for us Man United owners, for sure.
For sure. I mean, he's going to convert shots. He's going to be greedy. So he will get shots, but if he's getting them, close enough to goal, that means he's involved in the play. I like this, people kept complaining while Ole is there that, Ronaldo is the problem, right? And if you have a good manager, then he solves the problem. The problem is solved by playing two up top, because then you don't need Ronaldo to press. Rashford can press. And then you get Ronaldo in the box when you have the ball. It's such a simple solution. And of course, we don't understand the intricacies of the tactics enough to comment, but you can see that the new manager has solved this problem and has utilized, or will hopefully utilize, Ronaldo to the best of his capability, which is always a positive for this team. To say he's not pressing, remove him from the team, will be better off playing Greenwood is such a lazy comment that I'm happy he's pivotal, and I really hope it works out.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I think Man United themselves just need to up it a little bit more. And I think Rangnick, his strategy, his new formation will probably become a little bit more cohesive once they've had a little bit more exposure to it. That second nature, that sixth sense, knowing where your teammates are because you're so familiar with the system. I think that will come. And they've certainly got the attacking talent. So yes, not too worried short term. I think it will. We just have to be patient and although we have heard that before with Ollie, just have to be patient and the results will come. But we will see. But next to him is a Mr. Josh King. And that's encouraging for us as owners, surely. 16 shots and shooting fairly close to goal, which surprised me because when we were watching the Brentford match, he tend to be shooting quite far away. So I think that's still encouraging. Dennis is on this chart a bit further back, which says it all really, but plenty more shots on target for Dennis. And I wonder whether there's a correlation between the shots on target and the technical capability of a player, or indeed the confidence of a player. We've seen Jota with plenty of shots off target. We've seen Bowen with shots off target, with Mbermo, loads of shots off target. I don't know whether that's something that we need to worry about, or there could be a narrative that you say good strikers go for the corners and therefore they might miss by a little bit. Do you think there's anything in that we can try and analyse from?
I would... for me, everything boils down to, is it captured in the XGI or XG itself? And I think as long as the guy is... So if he was scoring better shots, or maybe he's aiming for the corner rather than, just towards the goal, then you would hope that, yes, he would miss more, but then he would also score, his XG I would hope, capture the fact that he when he does hit it on target, it's actually a goal. Whereas the other guy who's not aiming for the corner, but just middle of the goal, will probably have more shots on target, but a lower XG because those are savable. I hope that, these technicals have covered that, but it's always good to see lots of shots on target closer to the goal. which basically gives you, for me, a little bit of a proxy of the heat map as well. That even though your player is doing well, is he doing well from close to the goal, like Bernardo, as you said, like Jota? And I actually find the King versus Dennis thing fascinating as well, hopefully for us King owners.
Yeah, hopefully King moves back to like a penalty spot position. Fingers crossed with his easy
A couple
ones.
of penalties.
Well, that would be nice. But the thing that my main takeaway here is my assumption was that Gundogan was the guy that just ended up on the penalty spot for tap-ins. But Bernardo Silva is shooting closer to goal on average, and I always thought that he was shooting from outside the box with his really technically capable left foot. So the marriage of two excellent things for Bernardo Silva just makes me kind of want him, weirdly.
Right.
So I don't know whether that's anything to think about. I don't think Foden's on this chart because he has missed a few games, and this is not a per appearance basis. So I think he probably just drops off in that filter. But I think if he was, he'd be shooting fairly close to goal as well. But we've got lots of other players here. We talked about Maddison and Burmo and Gallagher's. These are the players that are shooting from pretty far away. As long as they have that capability to convert those efforts, then nothing to worry about. But positionally astute players who end up on the penalty spot for tap-ins, that's kind of what we want for FPL. We know that's a little bit more predictable.
Scoring goals are where it's at.
100%. Goodness me, a lot of information, and I wonder whether that changes our transfer plans, Pras. But we are going to go and talk about your transfers and your bus team, of course, for Game Week 17. We'll transition and have a look at how you're set up. It's a 3-4-3, Ramsdale in goal. So for the podcast listeners, I'll go through. We've got Alexander-Arnold, James and Dalot at the back. Salah captain, Jota, Bowen, Foden, King, Ronaldo and Antonio. What an excellent team that is. I'm quite jealous of it.
It's one of those things, good team on paper, but with everything that we're seeing in the news, who knows how many of these actually start. I was actually I was pleased about the Cancelo booking because I have 12 good starters. Or 11 good outfielders. So last week, this was resolved by the Jota injury, who I benched. This week, I was going to bench Cancelo. And then I'm happy with all the outfielders. I'm quietly very optimistic with Foden and Jota for the next two, because I think they've had their little rest. They're now back to what looks like fitness. So they should be good to play the next two games, which are good. I think nothing to say in the defense. I'm happy to have Dalot, with the obvious caveats that I mentioned, that Wan-Bissaka is back. Is there a possibility that Wan-Bissaka starts this week and I end up with 10 players? Probably, if that happens, because Davies also has COVID. But everything absent, if we lived in a COVID-free world, I'm very, very happy with the team. I wasn't planning any transfers because I think the perfect midfield for this particular week, both Foden and Jota, Bowen, Salah. Although Bowen's fixture against Arsenal maybe is not the perfect one, but over time, I think he's the guy to get in midfield. Happy with King against Burnley, Ronaldo and Antonio. So I don't think there's anything that I will do, but I'm also, I wouldn't be disappointed if there's a COVID outbreak and there's a transfer that I need to make, because I feel this team is ahead of other teams. This was the reason I took the hit last week. I wanted to be ahead of other teams. So people who are thinking of getting a Foden or a City mid or a Bowen or, a Dalot, if there's a COVID outbreak, they'll look to address that problem rather than actually getting the team into the shape that they will. Maybe they'll take hits again this week and do what I did last week, but I feel good about it, that I now am in a position where I can react to problems rather than catch up with people.
Goodness me, there's lots of talk about Man United COVID. I wonder if we've missed anything yet, but it's very worrying. I don't know. We'll leave it, but I mean, obviously our transfer plans might change if there is an outbreak, but we just have to cross that bridge when we come to it. We can't say we're going to be transferring out Ronaldo or Dalot or whoever until we have full confirmation that that's the thing. We can't preempt such a sporadic and unexpected thing that can cause instant carnage to our FPL side. So I'm afraid it's just one of those things that you just have to respond to.
All I would say to people is it's happening to everyone. So, not to panic and make I would categorize people who are at risk, look at team value, who can you lose for a week if you had to? I mean, for example, even though Cancelo is missing, I I would really not recommend taking him out to solve a COVID issue. Look at somebody who's maybe more recent in your team. Like I could think of Ben Davis to a White to solve the problem. That's the areas that I would kind of fix so that it can even be a long-term thing, and that gives me an extra player this week, something like that. Or as I mentioned, a 1 week high upside punt like Ronaldo to Lukaku or Jesus if I know he's playing from City. Very, very early to say, but I wouldn't certainly break the big guys in my team just for a COVID outbreak for a week.
Yeah, 100%. I think, the fact that we're bringing in the likes of Ronaldo does stretch our squads a little bit. For those with lower team value, I would stay strong and try to keep Cancelo because he is a fantastic player. We saw from the defender chart earlier, he's one of the three absolutely standout defenders. I would try and bench him this week and, as Pras said, deal with your squad in a different way. And when Cancelo's back, Pras, I mean, Dallow's presumably going to be first bench for you most weeks. Is that right?
That's right. That's the plan. But over Christmas, I have a rule of the first bench should be a guy who can start a lot of weeks. He can be a rotation as well, but you should never mind getting the first bench on. Second one should be one where it can be a cheap defender or somebody who is reliable, but you don't want to start. And the third one can be a dead spot. So that's usually what I try to go for. And Brownhill, I think, is a good dead spot. And yeah, that's what I would aim to do.
Absolutely. Well, as I said, I'm pretty full of hope for your team, but I'm a little bit biased because my team is looking very similar to yours, let's just say that. And I think that's probably because we were both fairly conscious of what the template might become, just trying to preempt about what that might be. So my planned moves are Alonso out for Dalot and Rafinha up to Bernardo Silva. Can't quite get to Foden, but with all of those stats, I don't think Bernardo Silva's a bad option with all considered. So basically our team is exactly the same, barring Bernardo and Foden. So that's very, very strange, but a huge compliment to your team that we might be thinking slightly similarly. I'm sure our template rating might shoot through the roof on live FPL. It probably might be in the 90s by the time we get to the game week deadline. But
I think with the team value, it's hard to get to. People will have a City made, people will have some United cover, but I think it'll be hard for people to get to this team, especially with other issues that are coming about. So look, happy where both of our teams are at this stage. And I would just say one thing for people listening as well, for their teams, given the COVID situation, have a different vice captain as well, not just Salah and Trent, for example, from different teams. And ideally also from different days. Maybe have somebody who's playing on Tuesday, because that's a game that we know is going ahead. So I'm actually going to shift my vice from Ronaldo to Foden, maybe, because I know the City game is likely to happen. Just some things we're thinking about in these very, very, very weird times.
Yeah, it's a really good out of the box thinking there. I hadn't even considered that. Normally, I put the vice on just another player from a different match, but this is like compounding that thought process in these strange times. So yeah, a good piece of advice there. I think these West Ham boys have a chance. I think that Arsenal fixture isn't as mediocre on paper. So yeah, I fingers crossed for them. I'm very frustrated, as we've talked about with Antonio. I really hope he comes back to form soon. But it just seems like his only good run of games this season has been game week 1, 2, and 3. And since then, he's on practically nothing. But his 40% ownership has been sustained. It's absolutely so crazy. But anyway, it's strange times that we live in anyway. So it doesn't make... it's not deterring far from the situation that we're in. But anyway, we're on an hour and a half now, Pras. That was a fantastic conversation, full of the talking points, the burning questions this week. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me, and best of luck with your transfers this week for game week 17. The deadline is tomorrow night at, is it 6:30 UK time, something like that. My advice, if you're probably watching this video, you're very aware of that anyway. But yeah, don't miss the deadline. And best of luck to you. All of you guys have been watching in the chat. Thank you for joining us, and best of luck for your game weeks. Yeah, thank you for joining me, Pras.
Thank you, Ted. It's an absolute pleasure. First time for me to be here, and love your graphics, love everything you do. So it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, and pleasure to have you on. I'm sure we'll get you back on in the future. If I don't see you before, have a fantastic Christmas and Happy New Year. But otherwise, yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you all for watching.